Got it? Okay. Good. Okay. All right. No, I thought this was appropriate to put this on the slide for this morning, and Chuck and I really were debating leading us in song, but we decided that would work better at a post conference happy hour than early in the morning. But I do welcome anybody to hum along if you remember these words. But this is just to remind you again, at the opening we said that this conference was really the beginning and not the end, and that we're pulling together a lot of people to address some really important issues and opportunities here. And so our goal at this first big public opening of this is to really strengthen our foundation of what we have in common, what we believe in, and what we recognize to be important as we move forward towards mobilizing CBK. We wanted to frame and address the important dimensions for mobilizing computable biomedical knowledge to improve health and well-being of our populations. We wanted to begin to grow the computable biomedical knowledge community. We want to start towards action plans on how to make this happen, and then from there identify priorities on things that we could do together as a group, that we could plan to build resources that we can all benefit from, and define a trajectory that makes sense for this, and then really start to plan next steps on that. So how we see this progressing, again, we want to continue to grow this community, and there's lots of ideas on that, and I've been humbled continuously throughout day one on how many things that I thought we might have to work on and define that actually other communities have done. So the potential for reuse and collaboration here just is amazing and just continues to magnify. And I think our challenge is really to find what works and how to apply it to what we want to do. An early first step of that is to begin to share what we've talked about and what we do believe as important in terms of our manifesto. How do we move forward with sharing that information? How do we move forward about identifying and including people that should be here that aren't here, and to continue to engage people? And again, all these ideas that I'm talking about will move forward within these special topic breakout groups, and I think today is really the day we're hoping that things begin to gel together for folks. Day one was very exciting, and a lot of us just getting to know each other and starting to build this community, which takes time. And then we need to start thinking about how can we sustain and coordinate our efforts moving forward. Again, we want to continue to develop this community in terms of next steps and action plans. So we've got lots of different groups doing different things, and we'll talk today, and by the end of today, begin to see how those harmonize and come together, and how we might move them forward and start towards some action here. And with that said, our goals for today are to begin to plan a range of activities to advance our work and really help us realize this mission for mobilized computable biomedical knowledge. Just to recap for those of you who weren't here yesterday, we had we tried very hard with our wonderful planning committee to balance this need for fundamental background information, so we're all be on the same page, but then to have an opportunity for special theme-based groups to really explore some of these issues. So we have 4 different theme-based breakout groups, and they met for an hour, over an hour, close to an hour and a half yesterday, and then we had each group sort of define important activities and move towards action plans. As one might expect, bringing so many diverse stakeholders and folks into a room, there was a lot of just get to know each other, that sort of storming and norming piece. A lot of the brainstorming was happening day one, and I think we're very excited about day two, but very proud at what these groups have done, and we'll hear more later today from them. So we've got standards and technical infrastructure groups, sustainability for mobilization and inclusion, and then policy and coordination to ensure equality and trust. And we certainly saw overlap of need for principles and coordinating activities, and lots of synergy between these groups, I think was clear to me. And then we've got, Chuck, I'll invite you to come up.
Thanks, Rachel. So we're doing the tag team.
Tag team.
Yeah, we're doing the tag team thing here. So Rachel and I met over breakfast and generated this slide, which we think will be helpful now to get us all thinking about the after meeting. But also, I think as we look ahead to the agenda for this afternoon, and we'll review that in a minute, we do have a closing session where we are going to focus more specifically and informed by everything that happens during the day-to-day on actions going forward from here. So you can also think about this slide as a framework for what we're going to be discussing at the closing session this afternoon, in addition to anything else that comes up. The agenda for the closing session is not closed around these issues, but I think this is a starting point. So just to elaborate on some of these bullets in more detail, as Rachel suggested, the manifesto was not a closed document. There was significant discussion around the manifesto yesterday. I did not hear anyone rise up in open insurrection saying that the manifesto is all wrong. If you feel that way, or if you have any other comments about the manifesto, as we said yesterday, very soon after this meeting, we will write to everyone, send another draft of the manifesto, and basically open a second comment period designed to, in light of the discussions that happened yesterday and today, to put enough finishing touches on the document to really settle that as Nancy Lorenzi said, an expression of our pathway for moving forward, and particularly the principles that this movement will stand on. So expect that for sure pretty soon after this meeting. Then there will be, we anticipate, parallel coordinated actions of the four theme-based groups that will be meeting again this morning, and the word coordinated is very important, even though it doesn't appear on the slide, but it does relate to the fact that there is good overlap of the groups. The groups relate to each other in very important ways, and one of the things we're going to have to be thinking about is how to take advantage of that overlap to be sure that the connections between the groups that should be there, and the integration that should be there is in fact there, and these four group products don't become four silos, which would not advance the agenda. I think there is considerable support for drafting a paper that will report on this meeting and the outcomes of this meeting. This could also be viewed as putting the manifesto, if that is part of the paper, into the scholarly record. We're thinking about journals, and we would welcome suggestions for journals to publish the paper in. JAMIA has, of course, been mentioned. Health Affairs has been mentioned. Other journals have been mentioned. So the paper is another idea that we will return to if you have suggestions for journals to submit this paper to. You can bring this up at the closing session this afternoon. Peter Emby specifically, but others less specifically, have put forward this idea of a governance for the CBK movement that we've been talking about, and Peter was articulate about a W3C-like consortium that provides a very a just right level of governance to keep this chaotic thing that is the internet coherent. We will probably need some kind of governance that is something like that, with, of course, a lot of details to be worked out, and I think this idea needs to go forward after this meeting. I think the sustainability group of the four groups probably has this component of the future most centrally in its wheelhouse, but I think it's something all of the groups should be considering, once again, recognizing the overlap and the interconnections among the work the groups are doing. So let me close this slide by saying that I don't think it makes a lot of sense for things to kind of go in into a idle mode from a governance perspective and from a continuity perspective after this meeting ends, because the CBK mission and the science underlying it aligns with the department that I happen to be chair of. I am happy for my department at the University of Michigan to going immediately forward from this meeting to be an interim home, and I will emphasize interim. I don't think it should be in any way, shape, or form the permanent home. We need much more of a neutral governance than one associated with a particular university would provide. But to ensure continuity with this proviso of interimness, I am pleased if, again, if there is general agreement that this makes sense for the department to carry the ball forward immediately from here, and also to provide a resource hub, much as we had in advance of the meeting, making all of the materials, documents, communications available on a continuing basis until this interim mechanism is replaced by something else. I would also like to suggest for your rumination that the group of about 10 or 12 people that served as the planning committee for this meeting serve as a kind of interim governing body going forward. And what I mean by plus or minus in this slide is on the minus side, anybody who was on that planning committee who would prefer not to continue would be thanked. So we might, in the course of things, lose some people who are on the planning committee, although everyone is welcome to stay. And on the plus side, if any of you is interested in becoming part of this interim governance, this is not a closed group, and if you are interested in being part of this, write to either Rachel or myself, and we can discuss bringing you into this group and making you part of it. So we don't see this as a closed group, but we do believe that not only does there need to be an interim home to maintain continuity, but there needs to be some kind of interim body. All of this being very preliminary, but in our opinion, essential to ensure continuity. We're going to throw things open to discussion for a few minutes after I finish, so if you have comments on this, hold on to them. So very quickly, before we get into comment and discussion, here's what's going to happen today. We're doing bullet 1 now. Bullet 2, we're delighted that Patty Brennan is here, and she will be speaking to us and with us in just a moment. Thereafter, we will go into an extended breakout session. We've left a lot of time for this. There should be at least an hour and a half for the four groups to further develop their action plans and identify problems that will be challenging and perhaps ways to address them. Lunch today will be a working lunch where the idea here is that, even though I've lost my badge, every badge, as you know, has a dot on it corresponding to the group that you are in, and we would like everyone to try to sit at a table during lunch today that contains folks with different dots, different colored dots on their badges and to have a conversation where you share the topics and ideas that were identified in your group discussion, which will have just concluded, and this to seed this interrelationship among the groups that we consider to be so important. Eric Dishman will be joining us. Is that right? That's right after lunch, and will be. He's the NIH head of the Precision Medicine Project, known as All of Us, and Eric has interest in CBK and its relationship to precision medicine. So we're very pleased that he'll be joining us. Then we will conclude with a report and synthesis of the 4 breakout groups, and this will lead us into our plan for next steps, where we will use this slide as kind of a framework for shaping that discussion and its exploration of those issues in more detail. So onward. We have about 10 minutes, and let's open up for questions. Blackford.
Chuck, terrific, and I really value, kind of the immediate action steps going forward. Otherwise, things can be a lull and fall off the way. One thought, though, is how quickly might we turn to seeking additional funding? Of course, the NLM comes to mind, but other foundations. Patty might have her checkbook on her, but I think this is a topic that might be appealing to, for example, Gordon and Betty Moore, or Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, or others who have had some association or familiarity with the work around health IT, decision support, and knowledge, community improvement as well.
Mm-hmm. So we're not going to put Patty on the spot, although she is totally used to it by now, I'm sure. Acknowledged, important. I think the interim planning committee will need to consider this very early on. Can the interim governance and the interim committee procure some interim funding? Gordon and Betty Moore is a possibility. I'm actually just finishing up a grant with them. They have expressed interest in learning health systems, and we did a planning grant with them around using learning health system concepts to pursue diagnostic excellence. And so we have, and others in the room may as well, have contacts with folks there. There are other foundations that may be interested. There are a few other government agencies besides the NLM that might also be interested. Don Rucker was here yesterday. Yes, point taken.
And I think I'll jump on to that and say that the work that we do today and what we end up with today, I think will certainly make it a little, give us clarity on where we might go, and certainly make a more compelling story of us as a community together.
Yeah, what we might ask for money to do.
True, yeah. But and again, we'll see what the sustainability group comes out with. I know some of what they're talking about is identifying different stakeholders and what they might bring to the table, what they might need from this, and so I think there's a lot of potential and a lot of resources and ideas that come with people from communities that we're not even accustomed to working with. So I think our work today will certainly set us up for that kind of thing, and there might be multiple sources. We certainly have a lot of tentacles on this, so great point. Bob had a question.
Yeah, not to put words in his mouth, but I was talking with Doug Van Howling about the early internet days and how money basically got it going. And basically you want to find the early stakeholders that have the most value perceived from it to be the investors that will get enough momentum going that others will follow. Now, the early days of the internet were largely funded by NSF, as I understand it. But it seems like as we go through our day and think about the value proposition of what we're building, we ought to be identifying who the stakeholders are. For example, the payers and the providers might be a good source to think about in terms of where potential resources might come from. So that's just something that we should be having in mind, because I think that's another way to, rather than looking at external foundations, we might be looking at, who are the entities that are most likely to have benefit from this.
Yeah, I think that's a great point and a great charge for everybody today as they go into their breakout sessions to start identifying who these other stakeholders are. And again, I think as we work through these groups, come back together and begin to develop these shared principles, shared approaches for collaborating, a shared vision, then knowing that trajectory, I think we can plunk in, if you will, different ways to sustain that and move that forward. So I'd love to see us really gel on the principles and the vision and the definition of all of the stakeholders and the people involved here, and then let the funding just see how that emerges. But great points. Other thoughts or comments? Josh?
Just a quick reaction. That's a big part of the charge of the sustainability group, is to actually identify. That's literally what our task is today, is to go through and start identify those stakeholders and really specific examples of the right ones and how we can reach out to them and have some concrete action plans for a specific group we need to reach out to, and our strategy for getting to them. So thank you.
Yeah, great point. And I think I hope others have had this experience, but again, I've just been continually surprised throughout the day of identifying new use cases, new stakeholders. The value of this is even bigger than I imagined going into this. So I think that list of folks and communities that we can tap into, I think, is going to grow. Other thought? Yeah. Alan.
Yeah, Alan Flynn, University of Michigan. Just a brief comment. Thinking about the bullets there, I think one other potential bullet we might talk about is how we can maintain after this meeting some persistent communications. So sharing information on a broader basis than the planning committee. So I'm thinking of, all the typical things, a web platform, bibliography information, perhaps keeping some of these groups talking, in a remote way, web conferences and things like that. So I think we may be ready to move into that kind of work as well.
Yeah. Great, thank you. And I think it is important and necessary that we do have some resource commitment, and I don't have enough discretionary funds to do this. So it is wonderful that that University of Michigan, this is consistent with their mission. So we are committed to moving the communication forward and putting these resources there. And so again, I encourage folks to reach out to us if there's information that would be more helpful. We've got a lot of background information. We'll certainly provide summaries of this meeting. But one thing that became clear to me is we've got so many different communities. We're using different terms. We have different sort of ways of doing things, different ideas of what a standard is and how to go about that. And so if there's information that would be helpful for people from that are newer to this, and that would help us attract more people to engage in this and understand our message, then please let us know, and we will want to include that.
Yeah, and picking up on something you just said, Rachel, I want to say something that probably doesn't need to be said, but I'll say it anyway. All of this disagreement and differing viewpoints is extremely healthy, and we need all of these differing viewpoints to build upon and integrate to ensure we move forward in the best possible direction. So I certainly didn't harbor any illusion that everyone would come in here singing the same song in the same key, and in fact it would be very unproductive in the long run if we did. So when I heard yesterday divergence in the groups, and sometimes very significant divergence in the groups, I was saying to myself, well, good. This is exactly what we need. We need all these different viewpoints. We need to integrate them. We need to harmonize them. We need to figure out how to go forward, but we can't do that if unless all of these viewpoints, differing as they do, are brought to bear.
I think we could take one more comment, if there is, before we move on. Any fun? Josh?
Yep. Josh Reuben, University of Michigan. I think getting to that value the conversation our subset was having at dinner last night about we really got to get to the stories of what it means not having this and what effect that has had, and what it starts to mean when we have it and what effect that has, and that collection of stories will help us communicate things better and will really, I think, will highlight value we're not even seeing yet. So I think that's an important piece of this is getting. There was a woman yesterday who talked about the story of her. Unfortunately, her father suffering from the burn and what that led to. But that's an example of what not having MCBK does. And we need the counterpart about what having it does. We need both.
Yeah, I think that's wonderful, and this was a nice forum. Several people shared stories from different perspectives, from patient, caregiver, family. I heard lots of that. So I think we've got a lot of value in things we can articulate. So with that, I think we want to move on. Yeah. So we are just honored and pleased that Dr. Patty Brennan could take time out of her schedule today to share her views on this and how what we're doing here really complements what the NLM is doing. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Rachel, and let me welcome all of you to the National Library of Medicine. I'm going to begin by apologizing. I don't usually sound like this, but a good friend brought me a gift from an overseas trip, and it is lodged in my throat. I want to also thank Hans and Dennis, who went above and beyond to make sure that we actually had slides here this morning. So this was great, and thank you to my team. The conversation that we're about to have in the next half hour has to be something that the library is central to, because we will play a significant role in assuring that computable biomedical knowledge objects are available. That doesn't mean we're going to fund everything. Sorry. It doesn't mean we're going to hold everything. It doesn't mean we're going to be in charge of everything. So I want you to spend a few minutes with me right now thinking about the library as a curator and a custodian of knowledge. These are two very important roles that we're going to have actually across the entire spectrum of knowledge for biomedical science and healthcare and health in the future. We have for the longest time thought of library as space and place is one. That is, you go to a library. You're all thinking of libraries, maybe sitting in stacks, maybe walking through to your carrel as a graduate student. Library served as an important place. We served as a repository. We held on to things in perpetuity. So you can go down through floors below this one and find journals from the 1800s. You can find monographs from the 11th century. We hang on to, we preserve. So we are the custodians of knowledge. But as you know, we don't give healthcare at all in this building. So holding on to any knowledge in this building will not advance health, will not prove to drive biomedical discovery. So fortunately, about 25, 35 years ago, as Bob was pointing out, the internet became a piece of the library. From the 60s, as the internet was becoming a piece of communication, to the 90s, where it became the core biomedical discovery engine for the world with dbGaP and PubMed Central, we know that the internet allows us to extend our responsibilities of curation and custodial work for knowledge to the world. So we must think about the activities of a network-based environment in support of computable biomedical knowledge. Now, the library has a special role in the things that we are aware of but don't hold on to, and that's our curation role. We have an opportunity to describe the metadata and the standard terminologies that will be used to identify and codify computable biomedical knowledge that will make it computable. And the internet and networks of the future will help us in traversing, finding, locating, and delivering that information. So the library has two key roles. We must become curators, and our curation role will be increasing because we will be, in addition to being custodians of knowledge and all that we hold, we will also be accessors to knowledge. I ask our staff, and I ask all of you to think about the collection of the library as having three key components. First, that which we hold, that's which we are custodians of. We will always hold some things, and frankly, we spend a lot of time right now discussing to what extent are we serving the future by allowing our relationships with journals to be more of a licensing model where someone else is storing in perpetuity the electrons of that article that you published last week? Should we not be holding them within our physical stores? Right now we don't. Maybe we should, and we debate this. Second, we will be connecting connectors to knowledge. That is, we will know where knowledge lives, whether it's in an institutional repository, such as an academic health science center, or in a library elsewhere, or behind the doors of pharma. Our connection pathways, we are committed to making knowable, traversable, and stable. So we become curators where we actually collect things. We become connectors. But then there's this third area. I don't have a good label for this. It's the knowing about in the moment role of the library. How do we discover today the paper that just came online at 9:30 this morning, 3 minutes ago? How do we make it possible, as you're looking to solve a problem for a patient with a complex illness, to know something that we have yet to index but might be available in the next building over, or in the next country over? That idea of discovery on demand is part of what we must build as a library to ensure the future of computable biomedical knowledge. Now, to help us go there, we've been guided by a strategic plan. So I'd like to spend a few minutes now telling you about the National Library of Medicine's strategic plan and also the National Institutes of Health Data Science Strategic Plan, both of which have been unfolded this spring. Then we're going to get down to brass tacks and talk about some of the hard work that has to be done. Over the last 2 years, we've been developing something that we now refer to as our Strategic Plan 2017-2027, transforming data into knowledge in support of transforming knowledge into health. This plan was developed with input from experts from around the country, some of whom are in this room, experts from around the National Library of Medicine. We had commentary from hundreds of people. We had many days of deliberation, and we've had lots of feedback on it. Some of it a little challenging, frankly. The librarians are mad at me. We have now, right, Chris? They're really mad at me. That's because if you look through the strategic plan, the word library doesn't appear very often. I mean, it's everywhere, if you ask me, but the word isn't as prevalent. So what's our strategic plan going to do? We're going to do three things. We're going to accelerate discovery and advance knowledge through data-driven research. We're going to reach more people in more ways to enhance dissemination and engagement. And we're going to build a workforce for data-driven research and health. Let's take a look at these in a little more depth. One must be committed to the principles of open science to envision a world where data-driven discovery is possible. Data-driven discovery cannot happen through negotiated clicks alone. It does not scale. So we seek a future of open science where data flow freely. Now, this is a future vision. It's going to take us a while to get there. We have many considerations, but data-driven discovery requires that we think in new ways about what data means, not simply that it's the byproduct of what we're doing on the way to resolving a hypothesis, but that it becomes a fundamental product of research, and we need to make that accessible. In addition, when we think about data-driven discovery, we have to think about all new modes of scientific communication. We want to foster an ecosphere of discovery where digital research objects are connected in a seamless and accessible web, where interactions and instruments that drove a study, this data that was generated from those instruments, the people who developed that study, the clinical observations used in that, funding strategies, literature that reported from it, models that were used, are all accessible and directly addressable. Making sure that computable biomedical knowledge exists requires that we be able to directly address atomic units of knowledge. We currently don't have efficient strategies for doing this. The National Library of Medicine's sweet spot is in the arcs between these elements and in the depth below each of these ovals. We create structures to hold collections or know where they are. We create pathways between them. Our second pillar of our strategic plan is to reach more people in more ways to enhance engagement and dissemination. We know the people who know us like us. This is great, but we don't know how many people who don't know us are out there, and more importantly, how many of them would also like us. So we have important challenges to face. First of all, for those of you who know us, we have to understand you better. without burdening you. So we have to present our information in a way that is actionable in the moment, whether you're an undergraduate exploring a new topic, a doctoral student investigating a new thesis, or a clinician in the ER trying to make a decision right now. We currently present you information in the exact same way, and that doesn't scale. That doesn't assist for computable biomedical knowledge to work. It has to be presented in a way that is actionable at the way, in the moment the individual is trying to use it. In addition, the National Library of Medicine must consider who else we're not reaching. The next generations of under us, frankly, don't read like we did. They Instagram. They don't even email anymore. It's astounding how a text-based medium has to transform so quickly into some other format. And videos aren't going to completely do it. And podcasts and audios isn't enough. Somehow we have to find better tools for integrating knowledge at the point of need and presenting knowledge at the point of desire. But fundamentally, what the National Library of Medicine's stake in this is to build a trustable, reliable source of biomedical and health information. An individual clinician operating on a computable biomedical knowledge unit has to be able to trust that behind that is the validation, is the evidence building, is the resources necessary to know that that knowledge will be tractable and will be defensible. And it's critical that the individual be able to have that trust. Third, we need to build a workforce for data-driven research in health. Now, the workforce of the future will not solely be a professional elite class of workers. We have a broad range of individuals. For 28 years, we've been hearing about the importance of patient-centered care. We must bring patients into partnerships with computable biomedical knowledge. We must recognize that what the knowledge is to a patient may be quite different than what the knowledge is to a professional. And how we integrate that into a point of care where both groups are able to leverage what each other knows best. We have to begin with K-12, helping to make data-savvy kids. And guess what? They're already moving that way. Kids are able to comprehend a whole different range of a technological way of framing information. We have to be leveraging that. Our important responsibilities, though, for the NLM is to expand and enhance research training for biomedical informatics and for data science. We are committed to expanding our T15 programs this summer in two key ways into the future in new areas. Let me tell you about some things. First of all, this summer we launched an important partnership with our training programs that are housed at universities that also have strong schools of library and information science to build a pathway of connection so we can bring the library science workforce into the data science and medical informatics community, and so we can learn from them. Because frankly, without effective curation, data don't do nothing for us, and we have to have those librarians engaged early. Second, we're reaching into undergraduate schools, historically black colleges and universities, minority-serving institutions, so we can expand the workforce. Because whether or not we want to believe it, the way we frame knowledge right now is very white and very middle class. And it's important for us to remember the knowledge needed for the future has to be as diverse as the country is, as the population is. So to create good computable biomedical knowledge tools, we have to have a broad range of participants in that process. I am committed to expanding the T15 programs. This year we had a wonderful experience. We provided our training programs with additional funds to delve deeply in enhancing their curriculums for data science. As we did that, we also built a culture of sharing, because fundamentally, to make effective computable biomedical knowledge requires that from the very beginning our trainees understand what it means to share data, share information, leverage off each other's programs. And so in our training programs, we're building in not only the computational base for biomedical science and data science, but also the sociological base for doing that. This will enhance the governance structures that you're proposing to have. It will enhance the acceptability of shared knowledge at the point of care. It will no longer be acceptable to say that guideline didn't come from our practice group, so we're not going to follow it. If we're going to really get the value of broad-based national and international computable biomedical knowledge, we must build a model of trust, of sharing information and understanding how to share that information. I'm happy to talk with you more about where we're going with the National Library of Medicine, particularly with our investments in open science. I'm really quite excited about this. But let me take a moment to talk about the NIH and the strategic plan for data science. The National Institutes of Health consist of 27 institutes and centers. They're listed here on the left. This year, thanks to your tax dollars, we had an increase of $2 billion. We're actually liking the Senate markup right now. Looks like we could get another $2 billion next year. Why is this important to the NLM? Because we now, at the point of need, have a ready influx of cash to help us with this. This has been very important. We had $22 million of new funds this year. If we get the Senate mark from next year, we'll get close to $20 million new dollars again next year. These are great things. So the NLM sits over here. We play a significant role in the NIH Strategic Plan for Data Science. We are not the head nurse of the NIH Strategic Plan, though, and herding 27 institutes and centers into a coherent framing for a vision of the future that is unfamiliar to most of them represents some significant challenges. However, with the guidance of the Data Science Committee, called the Scientific Data Council, a strategic plan was built this year, partially in response to the congressional request that we have to work with our partners and stakeholders to create a strategic plan by May the 5th. It was delivered on time and has been now included into the fiscal 19 and the fiscal 20 directions. There are 5 goals of the NIH Strategic Plan for Data Science. And by the way, my slides will be available for sharing if you'd like to take these, and don't worry about taking notes right now. The 5 goals include to modernize, to improve and to create a strong data infrastructure, to modernize the data ecosystem, to advance data management, analytics, and tools, to develop the workforce, and to foster sustainability and stewardship. You see within each of these pillars a set of specified objectives: optimizing data storage or broadening utility of and access to specialized tools. What's of particular interest to this group right now must be develop policies for a fair data ecosystem, because for computable biomedical knowledge resources to be useful, they must be fair. They must be findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And we have a hard enough time figuring out how to do that for atomic data and for the literature. How to do it for computable resources is going to present an enormous challenge, and I want to give a couple tools in a few minutes. This plan has been developed and socialized across the NIH. We are now in an implementation process where different teams have been assigned work groups. As I said, the National Library of Medicine plays a key, and if you ask me, an essential role in making this possible. We recognize that there are some cross-cutting themes that have to be addressed. Supporting a common infrastructure and architecture on which more specialized platforms can be built and interconnected. So we are committed to cloud implementations. We are committed to building common infrastructure that will house in a sustainable way large data sets, small data sets, analytics, and visualization tools. Excuse me. We have a commitment to partnership with commercial entities. This is pretty new for NIH. We like to develop our own stuff. But what we recognize is that the commercial industry is a lot farther along than we are, and we don't want to replicate, and frankly, they have more money invested in some of this. So we want to work with them. We are identifying both partners that you would expect, like Google and Amazon, as well as partners that you might not expect, small independent analytics groups that are helping us foster a strategy where what the NIH does best, we do, but what industry does best, we adopt. We will be enhancing the nation's biomedical data science research workforce. We must remember that running analytics alone is not enough. We have to be creating the new analytics, the new models that will take advantage of all sorts of ways of reframing data, from understanding how to efficiently integrate image data and laboratory data and personal observations into an analytical whole. And in order to do that, we need very smart scientists, and we need to bring them in new programs. We're starting this summer with launching something called the Data Fellowships. Data Fellowships is to bring advanced practitioners from industry into the NIH for short-term fellowships, 3 years at a time, to work in partnership, in tandem with us, to bring their analytics against our data. We are committed to making our resources fair, and that is about as far as that sentence goes. No one has the next sentence in that. This is a real challenge for us because making data findable requires understanding and balancing the culture of a community and the culture of reuse into one. So our mechanisms for attaching metadata have to be robust enough to address the needs of specialists as well as broad enough to make the data findable by non-specialists. We're extremely committed to ensuring information security of patient and participant data, particularly at the point of disclosure of individual identity. But we are also mindful of the importance of making sure that we preserve the privacy of the researcher as the researcher investigates new ideas. We are emphasizing the need to curate and analyze clinical data as well as data collected in the course of research. Promoting data standards. We've got standards all over this. We're really pleased to see that in there. And we're going to coordinate with federal, private agencies and international funding agencies, recognizing that science neither knows borders, boundaries, nor federal designations. I want you to take a minute to look at a video with me that shows you the future that we think we're going towards. Each one of those images is important to computable biomedical knowledge units, maybe through the discovery, maybe through the delivery of them. But when you think about this over the last day, I suspect most of you have been thinking about where in the way I live in my world, in an institution, in a library, in a hospital, in a research unit, will this fit in? But I want you to remember that girl running along the street. If we're going to really make a difference in health, we've got to get computable biomedical knowledge out into everyday living. One of the ways to do that is to make sure we have robust models underlying these biomedical knowledge units, and we have effective ways to access them. So I'm going to talk to you for a few minutes about modeling because I believe the library has a significant role to play here. When we think about models as a foundation of computable biomedical knowledge, I want you to think about this because it brings to this process three key elements that are necessary to advance the biomedical knowledge agenda. First, rigor. Second, reproducibility. Third, reuse. Models provide a formalization of judgment and knowledge. Models provide a way to store efficiently complex thoughts. Why does the library care about models? Well, we care about models because if you can set them up right, we can hold them, or we can know where they are and locate them and deliver them up. So we care about models because we need the guidance to know what is essential to characterize a model completely and uniquely. What are principled ways to assign metadata to models in machine computable ways? We cannot make this be a wholly human activity. How do we purposefully collect, identify, and assure storage in perpetuity of the models? Because particularly when it comes to clinical care, we need to be able to trace the clinical journey, and tracing through models will be important. We need to connect, linking models to data, models to research report, models to patents, models to investigators. A chain of trust must be built, and we need to communicate. We need to inform the scientific public, inform the clinical community, and we need to motivate use. Now let's look at some of these in more depth. What does it take to characterize a model? We need this guidance from the community building the models. What I posit is that there are some minimum elements. What really matters to know about a model becomes the metadata of the model. What is its type? Is it computational? Is it simulation? Is it probabilistic? Is it heuristic? What is its purpose? What assumptions were used when this model was built? Where was it used? What scale does it address? An individual person, a population? And does it scale across? How do we verify the model? Boy, this is tough. Is it implemented properly? When you release a computable biomedical knowledge unit out into Poughkeepsie, you got to trust that it's going to be actually implemented the way it was expected. Some of that implementation knowledge has to go with it. And how do we validate it? Does this model really work? In the real world, does it match what we would expect? That's where the cycle that Chuck describes is so critically important. We must constantly be looking at how we refine and get feedback for the model. How do we formalize model identification or create curation? Well, I'm going to call your attention to two tools that are currently in use that might give you a leveraging point to start very quickly, and that is the resource identifiers, or what's referred to as RRIDs, and DOIs, or digital object identifiers. I assume that more of you are familiar with the DOI than the RRID. Both are in use in the way we curate the literature right now. RRIDs allow for specificity at the model level, and they're actually used across a number of different kinds of research products, model organisms, for example, or research protocols. They are investigator-initiated, which means that they're actually a little bit disorganized right now. It's a bit of the Wild West out there. Voluntary, and they are assigned through an a priori assignment at the point of development, not after the point of use. Whereas the DOIs tend to be a much broader, more familiar, and more, because they now are embedded within an ISO standard, a strategy to provide the technical and social infrastructure for registering the object in a persistent way, and usually the object is at a level of complexity or higher level of abstraction, like a full article or a book. There have been some advocates to assign DOIs specifically to models, but it's rather elementary, and it may become more cumbersome than we need it to be. RRIDs can be useful to characterize methods and models across a whole range of activities, including software toolkits, including algorithm implementation. So the RRID provides a mechanism for actually storing and encoding. The DOI, as I said, is a complete declaration and is usually used for a computational registration. Now, a collection of models, it's really hard for me to figure out what a collection of model actually looks like right now. And if the library is going to be a player in this, we've got to figure that one out. We've got to know whether it's a collection of model is like a GitHub with a federal stamp on it, maybe, I don't know. Maybe it's a new kind of publication. Maybe you have some ideas and can guide us in this. What I can tell you we're doing right now is we are recognizing that some of the ways will be collecting models is holding them here, and others will be connecting to them. And then our third, discovery on demand. Within our PubMed right now, you can find both DOIs and RRIDs. If you look up at the top, the citation always now includes the DOI that has been pre-assigned. The keywords down below, you see where the RRIDs entered. And this is more commonly done in the biological community now, where the RRIDs serve to characterize the strain of mouse, for example, that was used, or the cell line that was employed. It is possible for us to make better use of these. We need your guidance on this. When we're going to collect a sphere of digital research objects, we have to have computable representations of those objects. Excuse me. I ask you, as you're thinking about building the computable biomedical knowledge, that you begin with thinking about the models that will be employed and find early building blocks that can be enhanced in the future to assist in this structuring of this. We need to be able to communicate about these models, and when the NIH becomes involved, the NIH policies take hold. This is something I'm presenting to you, frankly, as a little bit of a warning, because many of the computable biomedical knowledge discussions that I've heard deal with institution-based knowledge, not with knowledge that's been formalized through an NIH process. There's a different level of accountability. Once it enters the NIH process, there are requirements around rigor, reproducibility, and transparency. We have a dominant approach right now of interacting with the literature, but increasingly automated agents are the primary users of our literature. So it's possible to think about models embedded in the literature and having them activated or accessed by agents as a way of engaging them. It's critical for our process that we have actionable computable biomedical knowledge objects exist in a stable and tractable format to ensure accessibility, to document provenance, and to assist in evaluation. So I ask you to think about, as you're going forward in your discussion today, to remember that these ideas of rigor and transparency are already embedded in the NIH process. You can make use of them. Aspects of validation, verification, and version control, they're a little bit fuzzier. We need your guidance in these, and we need to determine about what best practices are and how we create tractable contributions of knowledge and how we manage knowledge that is not published in the peer-reviewed literature. I thank you for the time that you spent. I thank you for your patience with my voice, and I have a few minutes for questions. Comments or questions? Yes, Mark.
I'll go. This whole vision of a collection of models that will satisfy requirements for knowledge, for data, for everything the library cares about is very exciting. And the infrastructure and the mechanisms for cataloging and deploying these models is yet to be developed. It's obviously very new territory.
Right.
In your view, where is this all going to come from? Is this something that will come from the research community at large? Is this something that will come from intramural research at NLM? Is there going to be a mechanism by which there'll be cooperation? I know I don't want to even suggest that the wall be brought down, but this is a very big enterprise.
It is, and so I thank you for the opportunity to reflect on that. So first, some of you are aware that we have a new funding announcement that's out right now on computational approaches to curation. So we believe the building blocks to create a library of models will require intramural research activities, extramural research activities, cooperative agreements, and investments in structures that may or may not be held within the library. We have to decide, and I think it's frankly a fairly early decision, to what extent is a government-housed repository the right answer? Because I know there are a couple of repositories of models already. There's one at Yale, there's one at Kentucky, and there's been some development in those areas. The federal government should step in when there's a commitment to perpetual collection, when there's a commitment for, if you will, unbiased integration, and when there is a responsibility that frankly will not be taken up by the marketplace. In the fall of this year, there will be 2 new funding announcements released, U54s. These will be new announcements to allow extramural communities to develop resources as opposed to research grants. U54s are resource grants, and these will be for both developing knowledge resources as well as developing databases. Now, the bio people are on top of this already. They want to get all over it because the model organisms databases are really complicated to maintain, and I think that's fine, and we need to help them. But we need to get out there with clinical knowledge very quickly, and we need to understand where it should go. Yes, Blackford, and then the man in the back, and that'll have to be it.
Thank you, Patty. What a treat to be with you, and I hope you feel well soon.
Thank you. All these physicians in the room, and I sound like this. I can't believe it.
Saltwater gargle. No.
I've been doing that 3 times a day, vitamin C, and I've been twirling. Anyway.
You know, a couple times in our meetings here today and yesterday, the idea of sort of this notion of activating knowledge has come up in the following way. I think we're on a path between the TEFCA and the Trust Framework for Common Agreement for, kind of interoperability at the data level. But we don't really have articulated yet the idea of this interoperability at the knowledge level. So 2 thoughts. One is, could you do that in a way to follow on the great interoperability work of the ONC and thinking about how do we activate knowledge? It's one thing to have the repository and its availability, and I love the idea of knowledge in the moment. That's a really new idea. But I think what VSAC has done, which has been so useful, is to say, not only here is the repository, but here are services to get it.
Right.
I think in the future world, we're going to see this complicated, connected web of services between evidence and technology and its application. And to the extent the library can make all of these assets activated with a web service, that's a home run, in my opinion.
So thank you very much, Blackford. And for those of you who aren't familiar with our Value Set Authority Center, a VSAC is a tool that's used for clustering clinical phenomenon in a number of ways, for quality measurement, for cost. So we walk a funny line here. So we provide an archive in PubMed, and lots of people build tools on top of it. And so we provide an archive in dbGaP or clinicaltrials.gov, and people build tools on top of that. But we also provide some of the tools ourselves. Now, the librarians in the room are going to get squeamish when I start to say we might think about the future of the library as service rather than collecting. In fact, my belief is, yeah, Chris is all right with that one, okay. My belief is that we must be thinking about service all the time, because to collect purposelessly is a waste of federal money, and I cannot be a party to that. We also recognize that the purpose may vary and the recognition of that purpose can vary, and I'm pleading with all of you to remember computable biomedical knowledge has to be inclusive of patients and of citizens, which might look different than professionals, but the tools to access and serve it up are reasonable resources that we should be both developing. I personally would encourage this community to think about demonstration projects, because I think a small demonstration project involving a couple of institutions showing how knowledge grows, gets captured, gets reused, and gets implemented either by persuasion or by edict through an EHR could be really very helpful to us. The gentleman in the back, yes.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the presentation. I'm Lou Diamond. I live in a different space. I'm a clinician.
Okay.
I did spend 17 years as medical director of a health information company, Thomson Reuters. But I'm essentially in the quality measurement and improvement space where I spend much of my professional time. So I was really pleased that you emphasized the patient, which is obviously critically important, and the recognition that health, as you've articulated it, which is important, that's the focus rather than healthcare,
Yes.
is impacted outside of the delivery system. Delivery system only impacts about 15% of patient outcomes directed at health. That's my comment. But my question to you is, I'm sitting here thinking about how do I understood some of what you're talking about, and but there's a lot I didn't understand.
Yep.
Which is...
Shows I did a good job, federalese. Thank you very much.
No. It had nothing to do with your presentation was totally clear. It's just that I'm in a different space, and this is
Right.
all kind of new stuff to me. So the question I have of you is, do you have a message for those in the healthcare delivery system or in those about what it is you're doing and what this means for them and what they should be doing going forward?
Oh my gosh.
I mean,
Okay, no, I got it.
you know, do we sit and wait for, the Ivana, whenever it is, 5, 10, 20 years hence, or what do we do? I've only got about 15 years left, so that's my question. What is the message that we...
The message is that health is a team sport. And so computational knowledge and human readable knowledge have to coexist, that clinicians and patients both have to realize they're part of a chain of health information. They are not the end point nor the beginning point, and that the most important thing that we can do in improving health is improving the ability to use knowledge. In order to do that, of course, we need computational tools, and that's where the foray into representational tools like RRID is critical. I've already taken 5 minutes of your break, and I appreciate that. Thank you so much for your work. I write a blog every week. You can reach me by email, and I'm on Twitter. Good luck, and thanks.
Great, thank you very much.
We're just thrilled to have Eric Dishman here to spend a few minutes with us and speak to what we are gathered here to do in relation to precision medicine and the All of Us program. And without further ado, thank you, Eric. We really are thrilled that you're here.
Well, thanks for the opportunity. Sorry to be creative, interrupt us. We had some confusion on time, but it's great to sort of spend a little bit of time with you. I was thinking about the topic that you guys have been tackling for the last 2 days, and as I started to think about it, and I read the manifesto, I kind of thought to myself, it's interesting. For me, knowledge has not been about power. Knowledge has been about survival. In my own sort of cancer adventure, I'm able to walk alive and well on this stage today. And it really comes down to the fact that I was able to have the power and the privilege of getting knowledge that at the time other people did not have. A lot of people have known about my cancer story. I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. But what a lot of people don't know is I was born without my hip sockets fully formed. And my parents, when the doctor told them I would never be able to walk, just refused to accept it and said there must be some procedure, something that could be done to change that. And it's funny, before I was born even, and even before I was sort of had language, part of my family's dynamic was get more information, get more knowledge, get second, third, fourth, and fifth opinions. They brought that to me. It was a good thing that they taught me that lesson, not knowing that I was going to get cancer at the age of 19. And I have met people who had the same, I mean, you've seen people with pillow splints, you know, young babies with pillow splints on to get things to finish forming correctly. It's very common and very easy now, but at that time, a lot of people didn't know that, and there are a lot of people who can't walk. And you know, I'm a runner. I spent a lot of my time doing cross country and track, and I just think about the access to that knowledge and the implementation of that knowledge in my own care plan led to a very different life for me than those who did not have it. And then the other piece of this is if I think about the alive and well part of what I just said, it's like there's so many points along the way. I was diagnosed when I was an undergraduate with a rare form of advanced kidney cancer that they said would kill me in 9 months. At the 10-year mark, I said, stop giving me 9-month proclamations. And I do a lot of cancer patient advocacy. And one of the first things I still have to teach people is to not let the numbers that they're given become manifest destiny. And I have a journal. I have well over 2,000 cancer patients that I've been an advocate for over the last 25, 27 years now. And you know, I just sort of keep notes, and it's like the ones who really embrace that knowledge is key often outlive the proclamations that they've been given. It's not an empirical study, but after 2,000 people, and I can go back and look at my notes, I can see a trend. Those who were able to adopt a certain attitude of proactivity were able to get either themselves or through social support knowledge and data and information often outlived, particularly compared to those who really got themselves stuck into a kind of passive patient mode. I have advocated for some of the, I won't say who, but some incredibly well-known executives that you would know from Silicon Valley, who you watch them in their day jobs driving decisions and being incredibly data-driven and incredibly knowledge-driven, but when faced with an illness like cancer, like all of that shuts down, and I have to like reteach them to be like they are with their illness, like they are with their business. And so I'm particularly struck by how do we turn data and information into knowledge, and how do we share knowledge and the assumptions that undergird what we think is knowledge to go test that. Certainly, if I think about the original, my definitive diagnosis, on the day that I was diagnosed, I was over at, I can't remember if I was at Chapel Hill or Duke that, no, I was in Chapel Hill that day at the hospital there, but my Duke doctor was there with my Carolina doctor. And you know, it's not just rivals in basketball, it's rivals in medicine as well. And I knew I was in trouble when they were both there at the same time. They were arguing in front of me about what my definitive diagnosis was. One of them was quite convinced that what I had was something that was more like a childhood tumor, more like, you know, a weird form of Wilms tumor or something like that. And the other was quite convinced that this was a rare form of renal cell carcinoma or something like that, plus some other stuff going on in the kidneys. And they were arguing about it in front of me, and it was just such a profound thing in retrospect, where one of them was like, well, don't treat him like a kook, an old coot, he's 18 years old. And the other was like, well, don't treat him like a kid, he's 18 years old. So it was like, even just the issue of age, it was like, how do we put him into a box? And then I think about, and I'm writing a book about how once that diagnosis was made, once that knowledge was given to me and everybody else, it shaped how everybody interpreted me for the next 23 years, for mostly worse, not for better. And so undoing the categories that we find ourselves put in, when knowledge at one point in time is the best that we can do, but it changes over time. It's like this vestigial organ that I was laid bare with and became an interpretive field on my body that everybody saw me through. We needed to cut that organ out of the information system and out of the consciousness of those that were doing their best with new knowledge to actually try to care for me. So I've kind of spent my life, as I thought about it, really trying to help patients find knowledge, partly as a patient advocate for others. And for some patients, it's like I'm just literally holding their hand as they go through a scary procedure. But for so many of them, it's helping them find information and knowledge to help guide what they're doing. And as an entrepreneur in Silicon Valley, so much of my work was on health, building health systems, health information systems, knowledge systems, especially for frail seniors and aging in place, but also for those dealing with chronic disease. And so when I got the opportunity to come to NIH, and it's still weird, I've been a Fed for a little bit over 2 years, like 2 years and probably a week or two at this point. I mean, I had no idea that I would ever end up at the National Institutes of Health running what hopefully will become one of the largest human health research studies in history. But when I got a chance to come do the All of Us program, I sort of realized, hey, I've been helping a lot of patients develop knowledge one at a time. This is an opportunity with a platform that was even bigger than the platform that working for a company like Intel gave me to really have some impact on the world. So the essence of the All of Us research program, formerly known as the PMI, Precision Medicine Initiative Cohort Program, which did not roll off the tongue for participants or potential participants that we started talking about, and most of them don't know what a cohort is. Researchers will tell me, I don't like the All of Us name, it's too cheesy. It's like, it's not for you. It's for the diverse people that we're actually trying to reach around the country, many of whom don't know what research is and have never participated in a research study in their entire lives. But it's really, I mean, I had the privilege at Intel of having not only mentorship from, but a deep friendship with Andy Grove, the co-founder of Intel. And Andy taught me the term knowledge turns. It was not a phrase that I actually knew, and it comes from economics. Like if you look at Standard & Poor's ratings of the economic viability of countries, they'll still talk about knowledge turns. And what they're basically describing is the ability for a particular society to have the workforce, the infrastructure, and the know-how to identify a particular problem in their society, capture data to help understand what the problem is and what the solution might be, invent solutions, and then put it into practice to solve their own problems, whether it's a water supply issue or whether it's a health issue. It's basically the scientific process that we all know and love. And that's one of the ways they evaluate the economic independence and viability of countries. So Andy would always talk to me, he's like, we've got to accelerate knowledge turns. And he and I were both frustrated. We met while I was in a particularly nasty round of chemotherapy, and he was going through his prostate cancer, which he was very public about. And then again, when he got Parkinson's, working with him and his research institute on very early wearables to try to optimize times in the day when Parkinson's patients could actually have their most independence. And yes, those same wearables might actually give us insight into the unfolding of disease or the differentiating of disease. But always, as we were doing these we were always looking at ecosystems and say, how do we accelerate the knowledge? So it's really interesting. Right before I left Intel, we had started a study in about 30 countries around the world who were on the edge of both precision medicine research and doing precision medicine, usually in oncology, but not always. And what we observed in those places was even at the top tier places, the variability of clinical practice, even in those top tier precision medicine oncology services, was huge. You'd see the 3 or 4 oncologists that were into it and had gone through the struggle of figuring out what the hell a whole genome sequence is and how to use these tools and these things, and 2 others in the same practice saying, I don't believe in any of that. And these folks who were on the cutting edge of it were offering life-saving opportunities for their patients, and these others were not, right? Which is a testament to just how hard this still is. We are such in the early days of precision medicine. At the same time, we were studying places that were doing precision medicine research, and I funded hundreds of grants over the years out of Intel's portfolio around sort of personalized health and proactive health. And if I look back at all of those, and as we looked at the sites that were doing cutting-edge precision medicine research, they were getting, sometimes from NIH, sometimes from NSF, sometimes both, 5, maybe 7-year grants. They were often spending 2 or 3 years on planning and building the basic IT infrastructure, another 18 to 24 months trying to recruit the cohort, and in the 4th or 5th or in the 6th or 7th year, they started to collect some data and had just enough to start doing a little bit of science, and then it was over, and they're scrambling for funding to try to keep that thing going. I'm sure this sounds familiar to some of you in the room. So from a knowledge turns perspective, I'm like, this is nuts, right? And so the All of Us program really comes into that void and says, hey, what if we could build a cohort of 1 million or more people from all walks of life, particularly focused on diversity? So we're aiming for 70 to 75% of the 1 million people, and we're achieving it so far, to be those underrepresented in biomedical research. What if we could collect a diversity of data, behavioral, social, cultural, certainly clinical, and environmental, and make that available as a resource where we've built the IT environments, we've built the tools or leverage tools that are already out there and put them into our environment so that people can get to the science first. So our mission as a program is to accelerate health research and medical breakthroughs, enabling individualized prevention, treatment, and care for all of us. And the all of us there has lots of meaning, but it particularly means we need to do science on all people so that we develop cures for all people, not just those who happen to have been represented in what we've done in the past. And to do that, we have 3 fundamental strategic objectives that guide our work. And we try to, literally everything we invest in or everything that we say we're going to go do sort of links to these strategic objectives. The first is we have to nurture a relationship with 1 million or more people from all walks of life as participant partners in what we're doing for decades, if not a lifetime. And if we don't build that relationship of trust at a national level, then none of the rest of it will succeed. How are you going to get people to continue to let you look at the unfolding of their health over a lifetime like Framingham did? In a lot of ways, we're like Framingham, but the whole country and all conditions, with particular focus on those who have not been included in studies like Framingham in the past. Our second strategic objective, if we do that, is to build one of the largest biomedical data sets ever and try to make it as easy, safe, and free to access for researchers as we possibly can. And the third is, if we build it, will they come? Our third strategic objective is we've got to catalyze a research ecosystem of funders and researchers who are hungry to use this resource. There are many, and we have to admit it, NIH and other resources that have been built, but people didn't come, right? And what a terrible use of taxpayer dollars if we so effectively get a rich data set on rich people and build it, but actually nobody comes to it. So that's the task. We went through a year-long beta phase and launched nationally on May 6th. Some of you probably saw some press about it. We are, as of today, we're at about 82,000 participants somewhere in the process, from the e-consent all the way to the end of doing simple biospecimens. The version 1 protocol is basically a series of consent and authorization to share your electronic health record data. Then 3 initial survey modules, the kind of the basics and health overview. There's some additional modules that are coming available now after you've been within the system for more than 90 days. And then depending on geographic distribution, because we want geographic diversity as well as health status diversity, and then these underrepresented biomedical research categories that we're pushing for, people are invited to come in and do simple physical measurements and things like height, weight, blood pressure, and then biospecimen capture, which is initially blood and urine. So it's going well. I mean, we got out of the gate quickly. At this point, if you decide that you want to apply to be one of our genome centers who can process at least 200,000 genomes and 200,000 whole genome sequences a year within a year and a half or so, that deadline is tomorrow, so get writing. But we're including genotyping and whole genome sequencing for all 1 million people. We anticipate starting that and making those awards later this year. And the big challenge there, I mean, there's the cost of whole genome sequencing for 1 million people for sure, but the big challenge there is turning data into knowledge, right? I mean, if we admit a lot of the whole genome sequencing data sets out there aren't widely used yet because it's still too hard and the tools are very difficult for people to produce knowledge from data at this point. But our other big challenge is, and we are committed to giving data and information back to the participants who choose to have it, from raw data to interpreted results. So we're going to be doing a fairly large pilot of 20,000 of our participants starting late this year and ramping up in 2019 to do the responsible return of genetic information with some comparative methodologies. With a diversity of the people, it's one thing if you're somebody that's coming in through our system through one of our health provider organization networks and you're a patient that's taken care of there and you're coming to a clinic that you're already familiar with and they're already doing precision medicine. Though even the top centers in the country are like, we don't have the genetic counseling capacity to go do to even add up all the research people to add to it. And we'll be funding a genetic counseling resource and putting that funding announcement out in the coming months because it's going to be key for us to do this in a responsible way. So you can see some of the challenges that we've got. It's not just making that data ready to be usable so that people can go drive knowledge out of it, and hopefully thousands of studies and people wanting access to the biobank is at the Mayo Clinic, so people who want to come access and do ancillary studies with additional things to run on the samples as well as access to the cohort itself. But some of the other challenges in this are like, how do we collect data over time that's going to produce knowledge over time? If I think about my own experience and I think about what we're starting to learn with molecular diagnostics around tumors, so many of the tools that we have are used to, and it was part of your manifesto. It's like the knowledge is represented in static ways, and a lot of the data is static. It was snapshots in time that may or may not be representative of what's happening from a chance blood pressure that was taken, or I'm learning so much more about the heterogeneity of tumors or certain kinds of tumors that can morph and change in the body even within the course of 24 to 48 hours. and that the particular region that your biopsy was taken may not be representative of the cells that were in the rest of the tumor, right? So there's a lot of complexity that's like, hey, we're going to have to start capturing many data types over periods of time, and how do we represent that knowledge in time, in the variable of time, and pass that on in ways that can be done. And then I'll just close with the last challenge I have to you, other than how do we represent time and everything from our data capture to our knowledge sharing, is, and it's the challenge that we face. How do you give this knowledge back to a real diversity of people? We have people who are coming into our program. We didn't have tools that explained what research is to people as we first got started. And if we're truly going to be open to democratizing knowledge and data to all people, then it's like, we've started by trying to push these surveys and instruments down to 5th grade reading level. We'll see if we can actually push it even lower than that. But even just understanding that the vast majority of people across our country don't know what research is, certainly don't know what precision medicine is, have no clue, even after all of our press, what the All of Us research program is. When we get this knowledge back, how do we give it back to them? Because as a patient, I've been frustrated that it was such an ordeal along with the illness to have access to my data and to create knowledge from that. And I don't think we should be recapitulating that nightmare for people when it comes to the research data that we have. So we were happy to see the National Academy's report that came out yesterday. We're living and breathing the cutting edge of trying to give that information back to people. And I think that's certainly part of the knowledge challenge that hopefully you're going to be tackling as well. That's my comments. Sorry to interrupt your lunch and keep you even longer, but I appreciate the opportunity to come and share a little bit with you. If you want to join, go to joinallofus.org to learn more. Thanks. Sure, I'm happy to. It's your lunchtime.
Hi, I'm Paulina Sokolow from Drexel University. I've heard you speak before. It's very moving and fabulous. And my question is about democratizing the data so that people can use it. My question is about agency. So the people who are joining your study are people who have some trust in what you're doing and are willing to develop a relationship with you, which are certain segments of the population.
Of course.
And that's a challenge for you that you are figuring out now. When you try to return the data, the information to people so it has value, you will have the same challenge of how to not just make the information understandable in terms of health literacy, but for people to have agency, just like your parents did, to seek information and to believe that they can use it. What are you thinking about now in terms of addressing that challenge?
Yeah, I mean, it's been an interesting and fun in the sense of intellectually challenging with our IRB thinking about this. We're particularly worried about, we're worried about doing this in a responsible way for all of the people that we're focused on. But we're particularly worried about for those who do come in through our direct volunteer mechanism. They may or may not have a health provider. They may or may not have an electronic health record. Many of them are vulnerable populations. And by the way, we realize it's going to sometimes take 18, 24 months of building knowledge and trust before somebody's going to click or sign to join. Our national launch, a lot of people were like, well, are you aiming for 500,000 people to sign up? And I'm like, good Lord, no. We are aiming to begin the conversation, and we needed national press attention so that local press would pick it up, so that our community partners could leverage that local press to start having events and things to build trust and get input. One way I know how to try to build that trust is by having the people themselves actually provide the requirements and the input into what we're going to look at and the tools that we're going to do that. And so that kind of iterative user-centered design is definitely a part of the program, and we're adding participants now that we have them through all of our governance and all of those pieces. And we even have a kind of thing called the Director's Think Tank, which I've asked for locally here in DC. I was like, look, you don't have to cast the net far from this campus to find very diverse people that don't look like the people that walk around NIH most of the time, to be a kind of wake-up call to us about, let's hear from them about, can they understand, what do they want their community, what do they want scientists to focus on to sort of move in their community. So that's certainly not the end of it, but if you don't start with that kind of user-centered interactivity and actually include those voices in the design of your quote-unquote products, then you're going to fail at the end of the day. I think, the big challenge for us right now on the direct volunteer side is particularly around, we are a research study. We can't be responsible for the care of the people that come in, and the IRB and everybody's very clear about that. But for our federally qualified health centers who are key to our diversity strategy, how can we make sure before they start recruiting people that they have a series of community partners and at least resource awareness network for people that come in? So, let's take an example from an FQHC where somebody is part of our study. They're part of the 1% to 2% that get a pathogenic variant that we know what to do with, and there's a really difficult communication that needs to happen to them, and we arrange for the counseling for them to do that, right? It's like, what if they have no doctor, right? So we're looking at those use cases and trying to figure out what we can do. We don't have unlimited funds, and there are state and federal laws that prevent us from doing certain things, but we know at a minimum, and so we've got this kind of inventory that we're asking each of the sites to do of public resources that are available if they don't have the ability to follow up with the people based on the information that we give them. The other challenge we're having right now is, what does the preference engine look like? We have a pretty crude preference engine. Obviously, we're not going to give information back to people if they don't want it, but it's not sort of an on or off, right? I mean, there's gradations and variations. There's some people that only want happy news, and some people that want only, bad news, and some people that don't want any news. So I think the invention and the iteration of our preference engine over time is going to be a fascinating thing to watch, because the variability of opinions about this is quite large, and people's orientation towards and concerns about privacy everybody has a concern about privacy, but they're not in the same way. And I think one of the things I get frustrated about the debate in the United States around privacy is that we treat it as this monolithic notion, and it's so culturally inflected, and it's so literacy inflected, and we've got to figure out how to, we want to secure the data, make it as private as we possibly can, but understand that our participants have a wide-ranging views and needs with regards to privacy.
Okay, thank you, Eric. In light of the time, I think we'll adjourn this session here. Thanking Eric for these very important remarks. I think, Eric, you've really helped inspire us as we think about making knowledge computable, to be sure we think about it in a way that all stakeholders in this health ecosystem can benefit.
I want the
from
training
it.
class for your average citizen on Jupyter Notebooks somehow. I don't know how to get that done yet. I barely understand them.
Okay, so thank you very much.
Thank you.